The dockmaster's smile was the last thing Cale Moss remembered before the lights went out. He'd arrived at Halvern on a Tuesday, silver in his pocket, salt on his coat, nowhere he needed to be. The harbor was loud and golden and crooked, the way port cities always were, every third man a thief, and every second one proud of it. Cale had a cup of something warm in a dockside tavern, and then the warm feeling spread too fast and went too deep, and the world went sideways. He woke up in the hold of a ship, chains on his wrists, 40 other men around him, most still unconscious. A manifest card pinned to his collar like he was cargo, because he was. Property of the Halvern Shanghai Syndicate. Assigned to the Auric Star, 6-month labor voyage, northern ice route. Return rate, 11%. That was how the syndicate worked. They ran the docks, the taverns, the labor halls, and half the vice houses in the city. If you arrived in Halvern without connections, you were inventory. Dockmaster Edric Fane had been selling men for 20 years and he'd never once been touched because Guild Lord Renmar Voss owned the constabulary, the harbor board, and 3 of the city's 5 magistrates. The syndicate didn't just run the port. It was the port. And now it owned Cale Moss. Except, the moment his name was written in the syndicate ledger, something shifted. Not in the ship, inside him. A cold pressure behind his eyes, like a door swinging open in a dark room, and then the room was full of light. Harbormaster's Reckoning, activated, registered asset, Moss C, Syndicate Cargo Manifest 7441. Class designation, unranked, ability unlocked, ledger site, read all, active trade routes, debt instruments, cargo manifests, labor contracts within operational range. Range, current harbor district, scales with absorbed operations. He sat in the dark hold of the Auric Star and read all of it, every route the syndicate ran, 41 active cargo lines, 16 debt labor circuits, 9 vice concessions, and a private mail courier network that moved information between 3 rival guilds without any of them knowing the other 2 were clients. The whole machine, laid out in his mind like a map drawn in clean ink, every pressure point, every debt that was 30 days overdue, every captain who hated his guildmaster, but stayed because he owed the syndicate for his ship. By the time the anchor chain started grinding, Cale had found what he needed. The Auric Star's first mate had borrowed 1,100 silver from a private lender. Not the syndicate, a separate note. And the note was 6 weeks past due. The syndicate didn't know. The first mate had been hiding it in a second set of books. Cale found the first mate before dawn and told him exactly what he knew, quietly, without raising his voice. The first mate had him unchained within the hour. He slipped off the ship in a maintenance skiff before it cleared the harbor mouth, 24 manifest cards in his pocket. The identities of every man in that hold, every debt they'd supposedly incurred, false labor contract Fane had stamped, evidence currency. He didn't go to the magistrates. 3 of 5 were Voss's. He went to the 4th. Halvern had a rhythm, and Cale learned it fast. The syndicate's power rested on 3 pillars: the labor circuit, Shanghaied workers feeding the northern routes; the cargo network, 41 lines, most of them skimming tariffs through false manifests; and the debt engine, vice houses that ran tab systems designed to keep men paying forever. Knock out one pillar, and Voss would notice and respond. Knock out all 3 simultaneously, and he'd have nowhere to turn. Cale started with the debt engine. Not by destroying it, by buying it. The ledger site showed him which vice house operators were underwater, running syndicate concessions, but personally indebted to the syndicate at punishing rates, trapped in the machine they served. He approached 6 of them in 2 weeks. His offer was simple. He assumed their personal debts, restructured the concession fees at half the rate, asked for one thing in return: their loyalty went to him, not Voss, and every account that came through their doors was reported to him first. 6 operators, 43 accounts. A quarter of Halvern's working populace moved through those houses every week. The ledger site expanded its range. Then he moved to the cargo lines. The false manifests were the syndicate's most profitable operation, and its most exposed. 17 of the 41 captains were running syndicate cargo under false labels, which meant 17 captains were personally liable if the harbor board ever looked carefully. And the harbor board was about to look carefully because Cale had spent 3 evenings with Magistrate Orvain and a stack of documentation that made the magistrate's eyes go very still. He didn't ask Orvain to arrest anyone. He asked him to announce a routine inspection, publicly, with a date. The captains heard about the inspection before Boss did, because Kale made sure of it. He had meetings with 9 of them before the week was out. His offer: restructure their manifest through his network, pay him a flat 10% of cargo value, and the inspection would find nothing. Stay with the syndicate's paperwork and face the harbor board alone. 7 of 9 signed immediately. The other 2 took another day. 33 active cargo lines now ran through Kale Moss. 17 still ran through the syndicate. Renmar Voss noticed. Course he did. The man hadn't built a criminal empire by being slow. He sent 2 of his lieutenants to find out who was moving in his territory. They found Kale at a table in the back of a waterfront counting house, alone, reviewing a ledger. The lieutenants sat down. They were large men. They used their size the way men do, when they're accustomed to it being sufficient. Kales slid 2 pieces of paper across the table without looking up. First was a complete accounting of Lieutenant Drevak's private finances. 3 properties he owned under a false name, 2 of them purchased with syndicate funds he'd been skimming for 4 years. The second was a letter Drevak had written to a competitor guild 6 months ago, offering to sell Voss's shipping routes for 500 silver. He'd gotten cold feet and never sent it. Kale had found it in a dead drop the ledger site had flagged. "I'm not asking you to switch sides," said. "I'm asking you to sit down, not interfere, and go back and tell Voss that you found nothing. In return, those 2 documents don't exist. Keep your properties and your life." Drevak and his partner left without a word. 1 week later, the Shanghai labor circuit collapsed. The northern ice route captains had been receiving their Shanghaied labor through a single broker, a man named Set, who ran a warehouse on Pier 11. Set had been skimming the syndicate for 3 years, and the ledger site had every transaction. Kale went to Set with the same offer he'd made the Vice House operators. Your debt to the syndicate cleared. Your fees halved. Your loyalty transferred. Set took the deal on a Thursday. On Friday, 64 men who had been slated for the ice route were quietly remanifested as free, cracked laborers under a new charter and released into the city with their back pay. Kale posted the manifests himself, every name, every false debt the syndicate had stamped on them, on the public board outside the harbor hall. By Saturday morning, there were crowds. Renmar Voss came to Kale then. Not in person. Voss hadn't left his guild house in 11 years, which was one of the reasons the ledger site had taken so long to fully map his operation. He sent his senior lieutenant, Harvan, with an offer. Cut 15% of gross syndicate revenues, a seat on the harbor board, and a guarantee of personal safety. Kale listened to the offer in full. "Tell him I'll be at his counting house at noon on the 12th, he said. "He should make sure Drevak and Harek are there as well, and Dockmaster Fane." Harvan blinked. "You want to walk into the guild house? He wants a negotiation. I'm coming to give him one." The counting house of the Halvern Shanghai Syndicate occupied the top floor of a building that had been purpose-built to project permanence. Stone floor, heavy oak desk. 4 men in the room when Kale arrived. Renmar Voss, silver-haired and still, in a chair that was not quite a throne but was clearly trying to be. Lieutenants Drevak and Harek along the wall. Dockmaster Fane near the window, sweating despite the cold. Kale set a ledger on the desk. 31 cargo lines, he said, routing through my network. 11 more captains have agreed in principle. They're waiting to see how today resolves before they sign. That will leave you with 3 lines still operating under your flag. 2 of those captains are 60 days overdue on personal debts to me that I purchased from your debt engine 6 weeks ago. So effectively, you have one. Silence. The vice concessions. 9 of the original 14 are mine. The harbor board inspection is scheduled for the 19th. The 3 magistrates you retain have been provided with documentation of their own, financial arrangements with your organization. They will not be interfering. Renmar Voss was a man who had survived 20 years at the top of Halvern's criminal hierarchy by reading rooms correctly. He read this one. "Do you want," he said. "A full accounting," Kale said. "Out loud, I want the 4 of you to tell me, in this room, exactly what you did. Ship. Every man you sold. Every name on Manifest 7441 through 7509. Fane's face went white. That's 6 8 voyages. Yes. Kale didn't look at him. Start with the night of the 14th. I arrived at the Gilded Anchor. You put something in the drink. You want to begin there, Fane, or would you prefer Voss explains the rate you charged him per head? The dockmaster looked at Voss. Voss looked at the ledger on his desk. His own ledger, his own figures, written in his own hand, and understood that the man sitting across from him had possessed this information for weeks and had chosen to wait until this moment. Not because he needed more time, because he'd wanted them all in the same room. Fane started talking, then Harrick, then Dravak, because Kale set the second piece of paper on the table. The letter Dravak had never sent, and Dravak understood that his protection was conditional on full cooperation. Voss went last. He did not beg. He was too old and too proud for begging. But he listed every ship, every manifest, every contact, every bribed official, in a voice that went quieter with every name until it was barely above a whisper, because Magistrate Orvain was in the adjacent room and had been listening since the beginning. When Voss finished, the silence lasted a long time. Syndicate's operating license, Kale said, transfers to my charter as of this afternoon. Your personal assets, the guild house, the harbor side properties, the 3 ships still under your flag, are forfeit against the debt the organization owes to the 68 manifests. Already begun the accounting. Renmar Voss looked at him. Not with anger, something older than anger. You came in on a Tuesday, Voss said. 40 silver and a sailor's coat. 43 silver, Kale said. He stood and picked up the ledger. And they were good boots. He left the 4 of them in the counting house. Orvain's officers were waiting in the hall. Outside, Halvern's harbor was loud and golden in the afternoon light. Every ship in the dock running routes that belonged to Kale Moss. The ledger site was still reading. New routes coming in, new accounts settling into range, the clean arithmetic of a port, finally operating without a thumb on every scale. He walked to the end of the pier and looked out at the water. Somewhere north, the ice route was running its last voyage under a dead guild's flag. He didn't watch it go. There was a lot of work to do.